It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I'll be your host this morning. Appreciate you riding with us this morning. If you're joining us live on our website, that's great to see you out there. Give a shout out to some folks out, let's see, in Philadelphia, Baltimore. Let's see, we've got Chesterfield, Kayenta, not quite sure where Kayenta is, San Diego, let's see, Seattle, I've got Dallas, and Kissimmee, Florida. So anyway, thank you for joining us, those of you who are catching us live on our site. We're always happy to see you out there. There's plenty of other folks, but if I sit here and read the list of names, we'll all be bored to tears. Hope you don't mind if I didn't give your particular city a shout-out. I see Spokane come online and Branson and some other locations. So anyway, you're listening to America's Voice. My name is Mike Evans. I am your host this morning. We're going to talk about 4 separate topics. We try to break the show out into 4 segments so that we can kind of give fair and equitable treatment to all of the given topics that we're going to talk about. The first one, and I promised that I would talk about this morning, and so it's going to get the major headline, is Justice Scalia and the completely and utterly astounding prediction that he made yesterday, or a couple of days ago at the University of Hawaii. He actually came out and said, "You're kidding yourself if you think World War II style internment camps will never happen again." Ladies and gentlemen, that's a chilling statement from a man who knows how to parse his words very carefully, because everything that he says is subjected to scrutiny. We're going to talk about it as we move forward into this segment. Our second section is Obamacare. And the report out from the Congressional Budget Office is that the cost to the American economy will be roughly 2.5 million jobs. The New York Times did a review of the Congressional Budget Office's report and came out with the Orwellian principle, the Doublespeak principle, that that's actually a good thing. I mean, I got to tell you, to me, that is utterly astounding. Only this kind of Orwellian doublespeak, only with that kind of Orwellian doublespeak, can someone draw the conclusion that a loss of 2.5 million jobs is a good thing, based on the argument, that the people who are losing their jobs are losing them because it'll be a good thing so that they don't have to feel hostage to their job in order to retain insurance. You've got to be flipping kidding me. No, I'm not, unfortunately. I got to tell you, if you want to see a perfect example of the use of propaganda by the Ministry of Propaganda, the MOP, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. And quite honestly, if you cannot see this as propaganda, then I have nothing further to discuss with you, and I wish you well on your future journey. Please do yourself a favor and go find someplace else to go watch, because you're going to be bored to tears with what I have to say. I mean, this is unbelievably ridiculous. Our third segment is the concept that the IRS scandal, and there's now some emails that have been exposed from Lois Lerner and some other folks over at the IRS, between Lerner and the Treasury Department, that show that they were creating these secretly drafted new rules with one intention: to affect the 2014 election. Email, folks, does not lie. People later lie to try to cover those emails. But the simple truth is, their statements were their statements. Our fourth and final segment will be the Muslim Brotherhood. and how it has an open, willing, and wide welcome at the White House. See, the real problem here is that no one can actually get it through their head that an individual who has achieved the level of becoming the president of the United States would actually have a death wish for the country which he is the CEO of. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the real problem. You see, to us, it's such a foreign concept that the vast majority of Americans just can't handle it. They cannot wrap their arms around it and get this truth into their minds and accept it for what it is. And that, with all due respect, may well yet be our downfall. All right, let's break into our first topic. The Supreme Court Justice who came out and predicted, and I say predicted for a reason, that we will return to the days of internment camps and that we will see that again. There's two stories out there. One is on the Blaze, which I've posted up there on our Facebook and YouTube page and AVN and so forth, americasvoicenow.org, and Patriot FB. The second one is an article on DC Clothesline, which gives a little bit of an analysis about it. But basically, here's what it comes down to. On Tuesday, Supreme Court Justice Anton Scalia was quoted in a Washington Examiner article, which I posted yesterday, in which he's discussing, at the request of someone at this university where he was making a speech, about the possible return of World War II type internment camps. Now, if you recall, originally what happened in the days of World War II, there were internment camps created because the argument was that there were a lot of Japanese Americans and German Americans who lived in the United States, and that it was highly likely that these people were agent provocateurs, and or that they were Manchurian candidates, if you will, who had been slipped into the United States as sleeper cells to do God only knows what kind of terroristic damage to destroy the country from the inside while we were fighting across either the Pacific or the Atlantic. The Supreme Court ruled in those days under a case called Karematsu that it was legal. Now, since then, of course, everyone has come out and said it was a mistake, including the Supreme Court. And this question was to the Supreme Court Justice was, would you see the possible return of this type of internment camp? Well, he made two statements, and they were extraordinarily alarming. And I want you to understand, and we're going to analyze what he said, and I want you to read between the lines with me now, utilizing your critical thinking. Here's his response. Quote, "You are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again." That was the first statement. He utilized a Latin phrase to state, and this is the quote, "In times of war, the laws fall silent." And essentially basically stating that, when you're in a situation in war, law can be pushed aside out of the way and fall silent. And he was using that phrase to explain why the court had made that mistake and an error in the decision that they made against Karematsu, and will do so again. Now, when I say will do so again, I'm referencing the fact that he was clearly indicating that, he made it very clear. You are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. The second statement he said is, that's what was going on. The panic about the war and the invasion of the Pacific and whatnot. That's what happens. It was wrong. But I would not be surprised to see it happen again in time of war. It's no justification, but it is the reality. Okay. Now, the first thing I want you to do is recognize that the discussion as we move forward is going to be presumptively based upon the fact that a man like Antonin Scalia, who has been a Supreme Court justice, I think, for about 30-some-odd years, is fully cognizant and aware that when he speaks in public, much like the chairman of the Federal Reserve or what have you, that those words are parsed down to their most basic nuance, that individuals who hear his words will ordinarily take them and try to decipher meaning from them. And as a result, he would be careful about how he makes statements. Now, in addition to that, he also, because he's a Supreme Court justice, is accustomed to writing briefs and legal briefs that have meanings, both implicit and explicit. And as a result, he is a highly skilled man at parsing and carefully utilizing language. And so I want to preface it by that because as we analyze these statements, I think it's very, very important that you understand the true implications of what he's doing here. I'm going to tell you for the record, here's what I believe he was doing. I believe he was giving us a warning. Now, there are those who will say, oh my goodness, get that tinfoil hat off of your head. You are absolutely crazy. Okay, you may say. But I think he made it very clear because one statement followed the other. And here's what they were again. Quote, you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. All right. Well, first of all, you are kidding yourself is an extraordinarily imperative statement. In other words, he wasn't suggesting that we may see this again. In fact, he went on to say, if you think the same thing will not happen again. Now, he could have parsed that out and said it differently and said, you'd be kidding yourself if you think that the same thing could not happen again, or may not happen again, or might not happen again. But when he uses a word like will, and as a guy who's been a lawyer and spent his entire life parsing his words, the word will is a statement that is very, very clear. There is no question in his mind that this issue will come before the court again. Now, you're kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the warning. Here is the equivocation in which he presents the scenario. Quote, that's what was going on. The panic about the war and the invasion of the Pacific and whatnot. That's what happens. It was wrong, but I would not be surprised to see it happen again in time of war. It's no justification, but it is the reality. Okay. So recognize what he's talking about there. He's stating for a fact at this point that he believes that he will see the case come before the Supreme Court in a time of war. And what I'm suggesting to you is that the tools that they're going to use to argue the position that these internment camps, which, some people will want to call them FEMA camps. Frankly, I don't. I'm going to tell you what these are. This is the culmination. These camps, whatever you want to call them, are going to be the culmination of the National Defense Authorization Act, combined with the database that was started during the Bush era that was called Main Core, which will be combined with the NDAA of 2012 and the new NDAA of 2013 and 2014, in which the government has unilaterally given itself the authority, the wherewithal, and the capability to declare that they can create these massive databases of spies. Now, if you recall, I've done some pretty significant reviews and studies of that. And I can go through them again if you'd like, but ultimately what it really comes down to is the statement that's being made here is that these, in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, based on a belligerent act, which is undefined, you can be held until the, quote, end of hostilities. And you can be held in indefinite detention. And if you listen to the words of Lindsey Graham, who made it very clear that you're not entitled to any lawyer or representation or access to the court, you'll never have an opportunity to go to the court and say, Your Honor, either please define what a belligerent act is, or force the Department of Justice or the Pentagon or whoever's incarcerated you, force them to define what the belligerent act was that I'm guilty of so that I can at least put up a reasonable defense for myself and be released from prison. Now, understand how courts work. Once you are incarcerated, the only access that you would have to a court is through something called habeas corpus. And if you're not a legalese person, you've heard the term, but you really don't know what it is. Habeas corpus actually, translated, means free the body. And the argument behind habeas corpus is that at any given point when someone is imprisoned, they have the wherewithal and the ability to go to the court and say, you must give me a legitimate reason why I am being held here. And you have to produce evidence that shows that I'm being held within the boundaries of the law. Well, in this case, your habeas corpus rights will be suspended. In fact, habeas has been suspended prior to this, and especially related to the Civil War. In fact, Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus rights. And hundreds of Americans at that time were imprisoned and jailed as being a threat to the Republic at the time. So when he says, don't fool yourself into believing that this can't happen again, he's not suggesting that it might happen again. With a statement that strong, and that this is not an interrogative, it's not a question. He's making it very clear that this is going to be a case that will come before him. And I don't believe he was mincing the words at all. You're kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. Now, he may not be sure it'll happen during his particular reign, but remember that, as a Supreme Court justice, he's a justice for life. He doesn't have a termination date associated with it. He went on to say, well, of course Korematsu was wrong, and I think we have repudiated that in a later case. But you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. Now, they go on in the argument at the Washington Times, or Washington Examiner, to kind of cover it up by pointing out that Avi Sophir, the law school's dean, and this was the law school in the University of Hawaii, so it wasn't just a bunch of kids going there to learn how to paint. It wasn't an art school; it was a law school, and they go on to say that, to interject Avi Sophir's, who's the law school dean, saying that he believes Scalia was suggesting people always have to be vigilant and that the law alone cannot be trusted to provide protection. With all due respect, I don't think that's what he was saying at all. He went on. Sophir goes on to say that it's good to hear Scalia say the Korematsu ruling was wrong, noting that justice has been among those who had reigned in the power of military commissions regardless of the administration. Quote, we do need a court that sometimes will say there are individuals or group rights that are not being adequately protected by the democratic process, blah, 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 blah. What that is, ladies and gentlemen, is propaganda to soften the blow of what he just said. The Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act will be combined with the databases that are being built by the NSA under Main Corps, the IRS, the Obamacare databases, to find those people that are considered to be dissidents. And the word dissident is one that you better begin to remember and better begin to use on a daily basis. Because a dissident is someone that can be removed from public access for the protection of the public, but for the re-education of that individual. I'm telling you right now that within our lifetimes, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 50. Within our lifetimes, we will see this occur. Will it happen within 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18, 24, 30? I don't know. I can tell you, and you've heard me say it before, I don't believe we'll make 2016. I don't think we'll see an election in 2016. But I could be wrong. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time I've been wrong. And so, irrespective of when it occurs, recognize that during our lifetimes, you will see this. You, and maybe perhaps some of your children, perhaps your wife or your significant other or your husband, maybe one of your parents will be dealing with this particular issue. We live in a police state, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not familiar with that, you haven't listened carefully enough, because I say it all the time. We live in a police state, and the simple truth is that the Ministry of Propaganda will not educate you properly that we are there. That's the truth. All right, before we break, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Obamacare, and the Congressional Budget Office's projection that 2.5 million jobs will be lost, and the New York Times doublespeak of Orwellian descent that says that that's actually a good thing. I want to thank our friends over at Express Mini Marts 1 and 2. They can be found over at Express Mini Mart can be found over at the corner of 14 and 63 in West Plains in Old Granny's Cafe, that building right there on the corner. Make sure that you swing in there. They do have a drive-through. They've got all kinds of things, including beer and liquor at that location. They also have snacks and chips and food and lottery winners and great fountain drinks. The cheapest fountain drinks you can find at 39 cents and up. They're very, very low-priced discount tobacco outlet. They carry that vapor for the e-cigarettes and the vaporizers and things like that as well. They also have a second location in West Plains, right across from People's Park, where the swimming pool is in the center of the city. And you're welcome to swing by either of those locations. Make sure that when you do, you say to them, "Hey, I heard about you on America's Voice Now. Mike was talking about you, and I want to thank you for supporting that program." Make sure that you see all and say that same thing to our friends over at the Battery Station in West Plains, where you can get to them at 303 Washington Avenue. In West Plains, 417-257-7799. You can also find them on the web by going to batterystation.com. You can also find Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. Make sure that you swing in there for a lunch special. And Tuesday night, kids eat free. Make sure that you say to the manager while you're there, or your server, that you heard about it on America's Voice Now. Visit our friend Jason Henry over at Henry Law Offices on the square in West Plains. If you have a legal matter, either state and or federal, personal injury, as well as matrimonial, civil, and criminal. You can reach him by telephone if you have a question or you'd like to schedule up some sort of a discussion with him. You can do that by calling 417-256-4100. That's 417-256-4100. Swing in and see our friends over at Patriot Cigar and Tobacco while you're there, and you can call them if you need to order or obtain any information from them, 417-257-1776. They're on the square in West Plains. Great place where you can go in and sit down and get the accessories or smoke products that you need, and also stop in and meet some other friends who might be similarly situated. While you're there, make sure that you go into Wits End Classic Barbershop and get yourself a haircut. I was going to go there yesterday, but they didn't make it in because of the weather. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael. We'll be back in just a moment. Right. We have returned. You know, I want to thank a friend of mine, Imre, who was gracious enough to send me this outstanding sounding microphone. You know, equipment is part of this game here, and the better the equipment, the better the sound. And Imre was gracious enough to send me this very, very high-end, very, very, very nice professional microphone. And every time I speak into it, I really just love the robustness and the sound of it, because I've got one of those growly voices, and it smooths out the rough edges, and at the same point in time, gives it that full and robust sound. So, Imre, thank you very much. You're a patriot, man. I appreciate you. It's a very, very, very high-end microphone, folks, and not one that I would ever have been able to afford. Trust me. So I'm appreciative. You know, there have been some folks that have stepped up to the plate and really helped out in a lot of ways. Imre is just one of them. There's a doctor in Connecticut who was very gracious and helpful and has made some donations. There are some folks that have stepped up to the plate and matched donations from prior periods when we were trying to build this studio that really were, just amazingly generous and gracious in supporting AVN. We always appreciate that, and I can't tell you how deeply touched I am when someone says, hey, I can help out in some way, either monetarily or sometimes it's, physical labor and what have you. And, if there's a way that you can help us, by all means, feel free to do that. If you have a business and you'd like to advertise with us, I would please encourage you to contact me about it. Because if you want, you're welcome to contact any of our advertisers and ask them if the advertising works for them. I guarantee you they will tell you, holy smoke, you have no idea. In fact, when I left the one station we were on, because the radio station itself was sold, and before we moved over to Big Country 99 and the Rooster Radio Network, a lot of those folks said, the minute you get back on the air, I want to start advertising again, because the results that I get are just astounding. People walk in and they say, yep, heard about you from Mike, or I heard about it on AVN, or I was listening to the radio and I heard your ad and I definitely want to come in, and so forth and so on. So if you have a business, even if you think I'm controversial, even if you think I'm polarizing, you'd be amazed how many people listen to this program. So, and the truth is, this is a fairly loyal group of people who work very, very hard to try to work and restore and rebuild our nation, or bring us at least back from the brink. So do yourself a favor and send me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. You can simply put on there, somewhere in the subject line, advertising. I'll be more than happy to give you a contact, give you a call. Just put your phone number in there, and we'll work out a program for you. And it doesn't matter whether you are local or regional or national. We can certainly help you. If you'd like to utilize our listen line, it allows you to listen to the program 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's a recorded version. During the morning, it's live, of course, when we're live. But after that, you can dial in at any time off of your National Security Agency personal tracking device. This is the one that's sponsored by our federal government so that they don't actually have to work at what they do. It just basically tells them everything that they need to know about you, including the microphone on the bottom and the GPS chip in the top that tell them everything that they need to know. And the camera they can turn on remotely. So if you're utilizing this, you may as well utilize it for something worthwhile, which is dialing our listen line while you're on a long drive or a trip, or maybe you're someone who travels for work. Maybe maybe you drive a route truck, or maybe you're sitting in a tractor all day long. Perfect way to listen to AVN is to call 415-325-0725. That's 415-325-0725. If you are friends with someone who wants to listen to AVN but either doesn't get it geographically on our terrestrial radio broadcast, or can't listen at the times that it's on, then please feel free to give them that phone number. It costs America's Voice Now absolutely nothing. It costs you absolutely nothing. And so make sure that you use it. It's sponsored by a great group out there called Audio Now, who was very gracious and helpful about giving us that number and providing it for us and you. Please use it, because they want to see it used. 415-325-0725. Dial in. You'll hear a recording that says you're now listening to America's Voice Now, and boom, the show starts for you. It's your own personal play. How awesome is that? If you can support us in any way, please feel free to do so. We can certainly always use any kind of monetary assistance that you can provide for us. If you have access to equipment, lighting equipment, video equipment, studio equipment, we're always in need of that as we try to grow and expand our program. Please feel free to help us. We need it. You can go to our website and you can make a PayPal donation through the PayPal system and use a credit card even if you don't have a PayPal account. You can make a one-time donation or you can do a monthly pledge. In addition to that, if you'd like to mail us a donation, please feel we're not a 501c3, we're not tax exempt or anything along those lines, but this program does live exclusively on donations. And I don't take any of it personally. I don't get paid, none of that. So you don't have to worry about somebody, living large on your dime. I don't. You can mail us a payment to America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195 in West Plains, Missouri, 65775. That's P.O. Box 1195, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. Okay, so the New York Times editorial board came out and took the Congressional Budget Office's report that stated that the CBO is estimating that 2.5 million full-time jobs are going to be lost. Now, their reasoning for that is they're saying that many workers feel obliged to stay in a job that they have because they're kind of held hostage there based on the fact that if they leave the job, they might lose their health insurance. And anybody who's ever moved from one company to another or been unemployed for a period of time and had to go on what's called COBRA, you know what a nightmare that is, right? I've been on COBRA before. The prices were all over the floor. It changes everything, and it's very, very difficult. And I'm not suggesting that we didn't need health care reform in the United States. We certainly did. What we didn't need was this. But irrespective of that, the CBO has come out and made their statement that many workers who feel obliged to stay in a job because of their health care benefits will now be able to leave those jobs, or perhaps to work part-time instead of full-time because if they would lose their insurance by going to be a part-time worker instead of a full-time worker, they have the freedom to do that. Now, with all due respect, that kind of flies in the face of logic because, I don't know about you, but I saw a thing on Drudge Report the other day that fully, I think it was 60% of America lives hand to mouth. In other words, it's paycheck to paycheck, right? Whatever you got is literally, you get it in on Friday, and by Monday, it's for all intents and purposes spent paying the bills. And so the idea of this Orwellian doublespeak that the New York Times would come out and actually claim that this is a good thing because it's a liberating result of the law is laughable. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never read George Orwell and the book 1984, I strongly encourage you to do so. By the way, for the record, there's been a run on a couple of books over the course of the last few years. One of them is 1984 by George Orwell, in which he describes, and the plot of the book is basically you've got this Orwellian, this dystopian surveillance state where your television watches you. You can never get away from being monitored and watched, and they know everything you do, and they track everywhere you go, and they make all your decisions for you. Another one of the books that's been very famous and has been listed as perhaps one of the most astounding wake-up books of all time is Animal Farm, also by Mr. Orwell. An excellent book. It's been made into a movie. I encourage you to see it. I encourage you to watch it with your children and your grandchildren as well, your neighbors, your friends, and anyone else that you can get to pay attention to it. But there's another book out there by Ayn Rand. It's called Atlas Shrugged, and it's a tough read, I'll grant you that. It's about 1,500 pages in the first couple hundred because their plot layout and dialogue and character review are a little bit difficult to understand or to get through. But I got to tell you, Atlas Shrugged has been listed, and not by me, not by anybody other than the Library of Congress itself, as the second most influential book in all history in the United States. I know it was at least the United States. It may have been the world. It is the one book, other than, what was number one? The Bible. Number two was Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. And it has been classified by the Library of Congress as the second most influential book that has forced people or caused people to be to change their behavior, second only to the Bible. So that ought to tell you something about the power of that tome. And I would strongly encourage you to read it. But, you know, when the Times comes out and says they're pleased that 2.5 million Americans will be, quote, liberated from their jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Orwellian doublespeak, if ever there was any. In 1984, they constantly use these, Orwell uses these phrases where everything is said one way but really means something else. And it's the same in Atlas Shrugged. What we see today is exactly, I mean, it's almost, to be honest with you, as if our current regime of government has done exactly what the plots of both Orwell's books and Rand's books outlined. It's almost as if they're using it like a playbook, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it really is. It's hard not to look at those books and read them and say, I don't see our present-day scenario described anywhere better. I mean, it's truthfully prescient. Prescient as in predictive. Much like what Antonin Scalia said the other day at the University of Hawaii, where he believes, in no uncertain terms, I believe, and I think he was giving us a warning, that we will see a period in time in which internment camps will again be instituted in the United States of America. And even though it's wrong, it will happen. And I believe that he wasn't just suggesting that, you know, we need to be on our guard for that. I think he was flat out telling us, you're going to see this and you're going to see it soon. The Times actually came out and said, thanks to an increase in insurance coverage under the Act and the availability of subsidies to help pay the premiums, many workers who felt obliged to stay in a job that provided health benefits will now be able to leave those jobs or choose to work fewer hours than they otherwise would have. Really? I want you to recognize that for the propaganda that it is. And the reason I say that is because almost everything you hear coming from the Ministry of Propaganda today, and it doesn't matter what source it's from, including Fox News, by the way, is merely propaganda, folks. What you're hearing everywhere that you go is keep calm, all is well. Keep calm, we'll get this right. Keep calm, continue to work hard. Keep calm, accept the inevitable. Keep calm, the nanny's looking out for you. And the truth of the matter is, all the evidence out there is contrarian. All the evidence. The stock market is in a second bubble that rivals what we saw in 2008. We have a president who is acting so far outside the boundaries that for the first time in the history of the United States of America, we actually have members of Congress going out there and calling the president a liar in public, and moreover, publicly stating that he is operating as a dictator in a lawless fashion. And yet they refuse to do anything about it. They refuse because they are helpless. For a couple of reasons, not the least of which is the original 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendments changed the nature of our government. We no longer operate under the Constitution that our founders gave us. We now operate under a de facto shadow government that is not the Constitution we believe we have. And I'm going to do an entire show on that, so I don't, you can send me an email if you want more information about it, but I'll do a show shortly about that. The point is that what we have now is a complete torrent, a tidal wave that is as long as the beach is long. We are constantly bombarded and hammered with this misinformation, disinformation, with the idea that all is well, everything's under control, and we're here for your safety and protection. That you are wrapped in the warm and cocoon, the warmth of the cocoon of government, and that nothing will happen negatively to you. And nothing could be further than the truth. Anyone who has their eyes open, their ears open, can smell the smoke, can smell the fire at this point, can feel the flames licking at their skin. You know, I have people say to me, what are you going to do about the negativity of the situation? And I have to respond and say, I'm not the one who's producing it. I'm only discussing it. You can't kill the messenger for the bad message that you don't like. But if I pretend it's not there, if I act as if it's something that we shouldn't be alarmed about, if I fail to raise the alarm, then I am not only guilty of malfeasance, but I'm beyond that. I'm actually guilty of the crime, the same crime of treason and tyranny that these people are guilty of. These people, and when I say these people, I'm talking about some 5,000 or so people in government, in our federal government, hundreds in every of the 50 states, and probably somewhere close to about 1 million or 2 million people in the nation and around the world. There's probably millions more, a few million more, who are, for all intents and purposes, considered the elite of the elite of the elite. These are the people who run the Federal Reserve, run the banks, run the megalithic corporations, the corporatocracy, if you will, of the world. Not just the United States, but the world. This is the members who are the leaders in the Council on Foreign Relations, the Federal Reserve System, the private cabal of bankers where everything is a secret. These are the individuals who have so much wealth that they're not listed in the Forbes 400 richest men. They don't even want their name known. These are individuals who make decisions and have influence that if you only realized how deep it goes, how much they buy, how much they threaten or cajole or obtain, how they obtain that information or that influence, you'd be stunned by it. In fact, you'd be outraged by it. The New York Times, you know, there are a lot of people who are not really cognizant of the full picture, but for some reason, they are so ideologically bent that they refuse to see the reality and the truth of things. And when you have a paper that has such a broad distribution and reach as the New York Times, that's actually willing to go out there and tell you, ignore your lying eyes, ignore your lying ears, and trust what I tell you versus what your senses are telling you, you have to question the veracity, the legitimacy, the intent, the focus, the motivations. You can't tell me that 2.5 million people are going to say, thank God I no longer have a job, because it now frees me up to go from job to job without losing my health insurance. Really? I mean, come on. That's like somebody sitting there and saying, thank God I got cancer so that I can quit my job and sit around the house all day. Who would actually say that? Only in the sycophantic mind of fantasy land in the New York Times could someone actually come up with this kind of an excuse. It's inconceivable that anyone would actually think this way. And yet, they put it out there that 2.5 million people are going to be quite pleased that they've been liberated from their job. Notice the word that they use, liberated. I mean, their editorial actually says the words, and this is a quote, "It is mostly a good thing, a liberating result of the law." Now, you explain to me how being liberated from your job, I mean, this isn't some kind of a concentration camp. We all have to work. And I think if you were to ask most people, there's some aspect of their job that they don't like. And And many people don't like anything at all about their job, but they recognize that they have to do it in order to feed their family. Because they're not self-sufficient. They live in a suburb. They don't have the ability and the wherewithal to go out there and grow their own food and keep a herd of animals in the backyard. But I don't know anyone who says, I dislike my job so much, I'm looking for an excuse to be fired so that I can be liberated from the prison of work. How ridiculously stupid do they think we are? You won't be locked into your job anymore. No, and you won't be locked into getting a paycheck, and you won't be locked into being able to pay your car payment. You won't be locked into being able to afford that peanut butter and jelly. You won't be locked into making sure that the electricity is on. You won't be locked into paying the exorbitant price for the natural gas or the propane that you need at $5 a gallon to keep you warm either. Will you? But you'll be able to get free health care, which, by the way, no one's willing to accept. If you read the articles that are out there on what's happening in the real world in Obamacare, you'd find out pretty doggone quickly that, one, in California, as an example, these people are being given phantom network lists. They go to the doctor, and the doctor says, we don't take that here. Well, you're on the list. Doesn't matter. We don't take it. People are going in with cancer and being turned away. Was this the envisionment of Obamacare? Was this what you expected it to be? If you supported it and you thought it was a good idea, is this the deployment, the implementation of it that you expected to see? I don't think so. Yet, those folks are out there, the president himself, and HHS and Sibelius and all of these people, the people who stand to gain from it, they knew very, very full well exactly what it would be like. The truth of the matter is, we were played. And for the New York Times to come out with an article like this tells me that virtually anything and everything they say to you cannot be trusted. It's that easy. They cannot be trusted. They are clearly so far down the road of manipulative behavior that they have zero credibility. If they told you it was daylight outside, you'd best go to the window, pull back the shade, and verify it. And they're not alone. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to tackle our third topic, which is the IRS scandal and how an email that's transferred back and forth between Lois Lerner and the Treasury Department proves that it's not a, quote, phony scandal, according to the president. Make sure you see our friends over at the law offices of Jason Henry at number 10 Court Square in West Plains, 417-256-4100. Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop at number 2 Court Square in West Plains, 417-257-1776. With Zen Classic Barbershop right on the square in West Plains, where you can get yourself a great haircut for $10. Our friends over at Pizza Hut, where on Tuesdays and Thursdays they have a special price for lunch for the salad bar and the pizza bar of $5. On Tuesday night, kids eat free. They have that salad and pizza bar every day, 5 days a week. Make sure that you take advantage of that. Go see our friends over at the Battery Station, batterystation.com, or 417-257-7799, and see our newest advertiser and our newest sponsor and friend, the folks over at Express Mini Marts 1 and 2, both in West Plains. One is over across the street from People's Park, which is where the swimming pool is in the town of city of West Plains. They have the lowest guaranteed prices on tobacco and cigarette products. They have snacks and chips and hot food and lottery pricing, the cheapest fountain drinks you can get from 39 cents and up. They're nice folks. The place that's located up on 14 and 63 also carries alcohol. They both have drive-thrus, so you can simply zip right in and zip right through. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a moment. We'll tackle our next topic.
It's It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Glad you're riding with us this morning. Shout out to our friends out there on Patriot Facebook or patriotfb.com. If you're looking for a great way to get separated from the ridiculousness and the constant censorship and the trolls on Facebook, do yourself a favor and go to Patriot FB. F like Foxtrot, B like Bravo. PatriotFB.com. The reason I'm telling you to go there is because, one, I'm a member over there, and I stream our program live there every morning. And there are some other great radio hosts who I'm confident that you will like. One is J.J. McCartney. J.J. has a great program. And by the way, if you at any time you want to listen to any of these programs, they're all podcasted up there with an audio stream that you can listen to at any time as well. JJ has Conservative Junction Radio. JJ has been in the radio business for, I think, 30 years. He is a true radio professional. Unlike me, I'm a hacker and a piker. But JJ's a real true professional. And he's got this great program. I think you'll really like it. He has a strong religious taste and flavor to it. And he's got good common sense. He's got good family values, good conservative political values, and I think he's a true man of God and a man of honor. And so I would encourage you to go listen to his show. And because it's podcasted, even if you can't catch it live, you can catch it anytime you want. Just click on the button. The next one is the Midnight Patriot, and that's put on by Jeff Norton. Now, Jeff is the purveyor and the kind of the architect behind Patriot FB. And his show runs from 9 p.m. till 12. Of course, these are all Central Times. And I got to tell you, Jeff's a little bit like me. He kind of just does a ramble show and brings out a lot of information that most folks have. And he's got keen insight, and he's got a quick wit about him. I think you'll very, very much like that program. There is also WDFP, which is Restoring America Radio. That is with Donna Fiducia. I knew Donna back when she was doing, and we're talking, and Donna, by the way, was on Fox News and all of that, and she left all that, and she's finally just struck out to do her own thing and do it right. I knew Donna back when she was doing weather at a little podunk radio station in northwestern New Jersey when I was a young fella, in my early 20s. There is also the Patriot Radio, and Tom Lacavara has a great show called Resurrect the Republic as well. Tom comes on right after I do. And so, and then in between, there's music available at patriotradio.com. So the other thing you can do is go to patriotfb.com/radio. And there you can just listen to all of the shows as they come on, and in between the programming that's there, like my show and then Tom and then JJ, there's music that's played in between. And it's, good music. So I think you'll get a kick out of it. It's kind of like a community, folks. That's the whole idea here. A bunch of people, and they're very, very careful to weed out these trolls and the people that, we really don't want to hear from. So get yourself over there. Doesn't mean you have to close your Facebook account. It just means that it gives you an alternative as opposed to just being constantly harangued to death over there on Facebook. I mean, I post stuff up on Facebook in the morning, and then I get to the station to do the show, and I see that sometimes my posts are actually removed. Can you believe that? So, I don't know, somebody in their censorship department didn't like what I put up. I mean, can you imagine? Well, and they say, well, we have the right to do that because, you're violating our terms of service. You posted something we don't like, we can take it down. Well, they can't do that at americasvoicenow.org. And I post everything that I do in the mornings up on americasvoicenow.org. And I also post it over there at Patriot FB. So whichever of those three media you go to, you'll see the articles and the stories and the links that I post up on every show. I generally take an article that I'm going to talk about, and I'll throw my own little, my own little take on it. Like this morning, I put up Aaron Russo on the New World Order, One World Government, the RFID, and chipping and that kind of thing. And I just threw in a little segment or a little comment that says one of the most powerful interviews with a guy who saw it all coming a long time ago and could prove it. And it's true. If you have an opportunity and you'd like to see, it's an hour and a half long, and it's put on by Alex Jones, and it's interspersed with. But I got to tell you, when you hear this, and Aaron Russo was, he's dead now. They say natural causes. I don't know about that. After you hear this interview, you might question it yourself. But I got to tell you, Aaron Russo was a titan, and when you hear what he has to say and the proof that he has to back up his assertions, you'll be stunned. You'll be stunned. It's an extraordinarily powerful interview, and I really encourage you to go listen to it. So I try to throw these little things in there that will help you either look for something about it or, to try to identify what I'm trying to draw your eye to in it. Like the headline that Sheila Jackson Lee, she came out the other day and said, writing executive orders for Obama is the number one agenda of the Democrat Party right now. Wow. Did you hear that? Writing executive orders for Obama is, quote, our number one agenda. She's encouraging lawlessness. My comment to that was one word: treason. And I meant it. You see, I took another article here. 4 in 10 government security breaches go undetected. So that was the headline, right? So here's my comment. Stunning that this same government thinks it can manage every aspect of your life while it can't even secure the most sensitive data, which coincidentally is your information. Understand their thinking. You are a commodity to be bought, sold, traded, and ultimately, when you've outlived your usefulness to them, culled. It's called collateral damage. And so I throw these different things up there, and they pull stuff like that down off of Facebook because they don't like what I have to say about it. But I don't really care. There was another great headline I would encourage you to go see this morning, by the way, which is California just passed a law legalizing selling the food that you could make in your home. And as a result, they've created over 1,000 new local businesses. Now, you've heard me call California all kinds of names, including California. So my comment to that was, California would have been the last state I would have expected this from. But the groundswell of liberty-mindedness that is taking over the world should be evident to everyone at this point. Only the far left, who seem to have unlimited financial resources to spew their hatred of liberty and freedom, are deaf to the deafening cry and sound of freedom. And I mean that in its truest sense. In other words, you will notice it as you listen and pay attention to what's going on in the world around you, especially if you're paying attention to alternative media as opposed to the ministry of propaganda. There is a worldwide global movement. People everywhere, including a lot of people who for most of their lives either were completely ignorant of the political world, are coming alive because it's like they've been laying in bed asleep, right, in stasis, if you will, suspended animation, and they smelled the smoke, and it's brought them out of their stupor and forced them awake, because the natural survival instinct of humanity is kicking in. People are becoming aware. I did an entire program segment about a couple of weeks ago about this these statements that the world is endangering the New World Order's program because people are coming awake and demanding liberty and freedom. Not just in the United States, ladies and gentlemen, but all over the planet. I mean, it's going on in the Ukraine. It's going on. Have you been paying attention to the Ukraine at all? No. You know why? Because the Ministry of Propaganda isn't really telling you about it. They give you a little story here and there, and they drop you a tidbit, but they don't even give you enough to really whet your appetite or really inform you about what's really happening over there. The truth of the matter is, in Ukraine, the president is very much like our president, doing his own thing, even though the people have told him absolutely not. He's trying to sign a deal that would, for all intents and purposes, put the Ukraine back up underneath the jurisdiction of Russia. And the people are saying, we don't want to be part of Russia anymore. We want to be part of the European Union. Now, personally, I think that's just as bad a mistake, but okay. It's their call. It's their country. And the president is absolutely defying the will of the people over there. And so there's clashes with police. They've in protest taken over the entire city government or the city where the government is headquartered at, and they are, for all intents and purposes, camping there, right? Much like the Egyptians did. You saw the movement in Egypt. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, the world is just tired of being treated like we're chattel. Chattel, C-H-A-T-T-E-L, chattel, a product to be bought and sold and traded, a possession. And that is how a few million people, planet-wide, treat the rest of the 7.5 billion of us. I mean, literally, you got 3 to 5 million people on the planet who control everything. They dictate what we can do, where we can go, how we should act, whether we make it or don't make it, our economies, how much we get, how much we don't get, whether we can say this or say that or talk about this or whatever the case may be. I mean, the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, these people aren't interested in money because they already have more money than they could possibly hope to spend in their lifetime. I mean, look, when you have... Just take Bill Gates for a minute. When you got $60 or $75 billion, you can't possibly spend all that money. It's inconceivable for the average person to even understand that. But I'm telling you right now, no matter how profligate, no matter how wasteful you are, you can't spend $70 billion. And he's not the richest man in the world. When you have $5 billion, you can't spend it all. And there's a ton of those. Recognize what's happening here. There's a very, very small cadre of world individuals, world leaders, and I use the term leader, with some chagrin. And they're not interested in making more money. Because when you have all the money that you could ever possibly hope to spend, the game that's afoot of trying to earn more money or win in business or get a contract or build an industry or a titanic, business, it's gone. You've already achieved all that. So what's left? You get to play with people's lives. It's all about power and it's all about control. And money, trust me, is the furthest thing from their minds. But money can control you. And that's why when we see the IRS and Lois Lerner and the Treasury Department swapping emails back and forth that show that they had secretly drafted new rules in something called an off plan. Their goal was to quiet down and eliminate the power of 501c4 corporations or PACs, political action committees and so forth, that would be able to affect and influence the 2012 and 2014 elections. Because money can move things. And isn't it interesting that the left, who seems to have an unlimited amount of it, unlimited resources of it, I mean, I cannot believe how much money that a small minority of radical leftist jihadists, actually, they're extremists, have access to. I mean, listen, if somebody said to me, "Look, Mike, I'm gonna put up $250,000 so you can build a television studio and take on the world," I could do it. These guys don't even have to ask. People walk up and write them checks. It's unbelievable to me. Why is the Patriot movement made up of people who are perpetually broke? Well, I point you to the IRS scandal. The Treasury Department and the former IRS official Lois Lerner, they conspired together to draft new rules under 501c4 that would restrict the activity of conservative groups in a way that would not be disclosed publicly. In other words, they meant these rules to be hidden from the public. And this is according to a House committee, Ways and Means committee from the House. This isn't, some radical, right-wing, or Christian conservative magazine out there. This is a House committee on the Ways and Means. The Treasury Department and Lois Lerner devised these new rules in what's called an off-plan system, meaning that these rules would not be published in a public schedule or in a public document that the IRS would make available to the general public. They planned these rules back in 2012 while the IRS was targeting these conservative groups, and it was in full onslaught mode. And their goal was to place these very, very severely limiting strategies on what political activity they could control through the IRS, which would limit the concept of these conservative groups and having their ability to utilize the not-for-profit laws that, quite frankly, their liberal cronies use to almost a criminal extent. So this woman named Ruth Madrigal, who's a Treasury official. Now, this, frankly, ought to be used in her criminal trial. Don't know who in your organization is keeping tabs on C4s, but since we mentioned potentially addressing them off-plan in 2013, I've got my radar up, and this seemed interesting. That was an email dated June 14th, 2012, that was sent to Lerner and was obtained, I'm not quite sure how, by the Ways and Means Committee, and of course Daily Caller, which is the one who put this particular article out, got a copy of the email. Now, this idea of proposing these secret rules that would only apply to conservatives who had 501c4, and recognize the difference between 501c3 and 501c4. 501c3 is religious organizations. 501c4 are organizations that are educational, right? Really, they're not even supposed to be political, but they are, and everybody, plays the game of, well, I'm not being political, I'm a get-out-the-vote kind of organization. Yeah, right. So David Camp, he is the chairman of the committee, he came out and said, if Treasury and the IRS fabricated the rationale for a rule change, it would tend to raise questions about the integrity of the rulemaking process. With all due respect to Mr. Camp, that is severely understating the obvious. Let me read it to you again. If Treasury and the IRS fabricated the rationale for a rule change, it would tend to raise questions about the integrity. It wouldn't tend to raise a question. The only question it should tend to raise is, how many people are we going to prosecute for under this crime? He goes on to say, I want to be perfectly clear. Yeah, right. This committee will fight any and all efforts to restrict the rights of groups to organize, speak out, and educate the public, just as unions are allowed to do so. We will get to the bottom of this. and I expect the IRS to produce quickly the outstanding documents that the committee has requested. I believe the IRS has a long way to go in restoring its credibility, but you can take a first step by complying with the committee request and stopping all action against 501c4 groups until the appropriate investigations are completed. With all due respect, that should not be a request. That should be a demand. And if we had a Justice Department that wasn't run by a traitor like Eric Holder, who's in the hip pocket of this tyrant that you call president, we would have perp walks going on all over D.C., ladies and gentlemen. And that's what we need. We need perp walks. We need people pulling a hoodie down over their face, putting a magazine or a newspaper in front of their face as they're marched out in handcuffs. That's the truth. And nothing else will do. Because when you leave these people in power like this, it's like sitting there and saying, the guys who robbed the bank, we're not going to charge them with it because they have immunity and impunity because they work for the government, which means that they're only just going to keep coming back and robbing the bank over and over and over again. The truth is, there were 292 conservative groups that were subjected to unfair treatment between 2010 and 2012. There were only 6 liberal groups that were alleged to have gotten similar treatment. And for the record, all 6 of those were finally given their 501, their tax-exempt status. The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, that we're seeing the live example of an enemies list in play. And you cannot deny it. They can throw out all the arguments that they want, that this is conspiracy theory and nonsense. But the truth of the matter is, the evidence is clear. This was a concerted, willful effort on the part of this administration, its supporters, and I believe, and I have no doubt in my mind that it goes straight up all the way to the top to the White House. There's no denying it. And if he's not physically responsible for actually ordering it, he set the tone that made it so clear it couldn't help but be done. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Please make sure that you find our friends over at Express Mini Marts 1 and 2 in West Plains. One is on the corner of 14 and 63, the main drag, and that's just before you get into the city of West Plains, and Old Granny's Cafe. Make sure that you see their other location that is located down across the street from the city pool at People's Park in the heart of West Plains. See our friends over at the battery station at 417-257-7799 and also 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. That's the Pizza Hut in West Plains, the only one here. Make sure that you get over there and visit them. Our friend Jason Henry over at the law offices of Jason Henry, 417-256-4100. Handles criminal and civil and state and federal cases. Make sure that you give him a call. Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop and Wits End Classic Barber Shop, all on the square in West Plains. Make sure that you see those folks. If you're looking to do any kind of web development work or e-learning, go visit our friends at airbridgeweb.com. That's airbridgeweb.com. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to tackle our fourth and final topic here, which is the Muslim Brotherhood and how they get a wide-open welcome at the White House. Oh, yeah. I love the sound of that kick drum this guy's got. You know, this song was written for me by a guy in Romania. I kid you not. A guy in Romania wrote this bumper music for me. And it's actually a full-length song. It's about 5 or 6 minutes. And it really is great because he goes through all these different variations on it. And I asked him if I could copyright it for use for the show, and he said, of course. And so we use it as the bumper. One of these days, if you're interested, I'll send you the whole thing because it's got a great groove to it. I know, it's not country. Some people don't like it, but I do, and it's my show. So, there. I'm going to talk this segment here about the Muslim Brotherhood and how they've been welcomed to the White House with open arms. And the part about it that disturbs me is that, you know, the White House has been so hateful towards our own country and our own political parties here. And I think the real problem that we have, ladies and gentlemen, is that, you know, the United States, when we were growing up as kids, this was always, you know, pounded into our heads, the land of the free, the home of the brave, and mom and apple pie, and the best country in the world, and no place better, and no place freer, that everybody, you know, has rights to freely speak and think and worship and so forth and so on. And we grew up with that mentality and that thinking and that knowledge, you know, in our minds. And, you know, even when we've had presidents who were bad presidents, I, you know, point out like Jimmy Carter would be a good example, right? Jimmy Carter was a bad president. He used bad judgment. He had bad policies. But Jimmy Carter wasn't poisonous. And when I say poisonous, I mean suicidally poisonous. But this president is. And I got to tell you, because suicide is so, you know, ingrained into us as a negative thing, we can't really wrap our heads and our arms around the concept that we would actually have a president, a man who would have achieved the office of president, who is intentionally trying to destroy our nation. And all interviews by Bill O'Reilly to the contrary, this man is actively, physically working to destroy the United States of America. Of that, personally, I have no doubt. Now, it's only my opinion. You can disagree with me if you like. And that's fine. I respect your opinion, and I respect your right to have it. I respect your right to disagree with me so strongly that I would lay down my life for you to have it, even though we can't ever come to an agreement. But you see, we can't get it through our heads that we've actually got someone in the White House who's focused on our suicide. And it's like having your hand, and it's out of your control. And it's holding a gun and it's pointing it at your head, and you cannot for the life of you fathom how is that hand moving on its own. You're not controlling it anymore. And it's pointing a weapon at your brain that is going to, that you know has a terrible end result. And you can't quite believe the reality that it's my hand, it's holding a weapon I didn't choose to pick up, and it's pointing it at my mind, and I cannot stop it. You know, might get a few seconds to figure, you know, to be incredulous. And in this case, you know, we have more than a few seconds to be incredulous. We've had 5 years, and we got 3 more to go. But when you got a guy who openly invites enemies of the nation into the White House, and he gives them a warmer welcome than he does our allies and our friends, or even our own countrymen, you got to question the motivation and the loyalty of that man. Now, the guy who came in here was a senior member of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was hosted in the White House. His name is Anas al-Takriti, and he's a British lobbyist for the Muslim Brotherhood. And his father actually heads Iraq's Muslim Brotherhood party. Now, let's just understand where we stand here for a moment. we went over to Iraq, and we fought a war over there for years. We lost literally thousands of our young lives, our young men and women. And it cost us, I don't know how much in treasure. The real treasure here was not the money, the gold. The real treasure here was the loss of youth and the brilliant minds and the hearts that could have produced something great with their lives in this nation. You know, that there's these men and women had some value to bring to us. And their lives were taken for an ideal. But when our president openly invites the enemy to the White House and warmly welcomes them, it betrays everything that those men and women put their lives on the line for. It betrays every member of our armed services who's missing a leg or an eye or has got brain injuries that have changed their lives forever and stolen their ability to do the best that they could do with their abilities and skills and talents that were granted to them by God or their creator or nature. I don't care what you think. Whatever you believe, I don't care. You see, no matter what you believe, you can't deny that these men and women who were over there had the promise of something greater that they could do for one themselves and their own families and their wives or husbands and their own children. And in being great, they would pass that on, and the nation would benefit from the fruits of that. But this guy, Al-Takriti, he's tied to Hamas. And he walks into the White House, and they show the picture of the president shaking hands with this guy. Now, for the record, this guy is an Iraqi Muslim Brotherhood member. And if you didn't hear about it, last night, a bunch of explosions went off in Baghdad and various parts of the cities as a planned terrorist event. And 32 people were killed and hundreds wounded in an attack that was clearly intended to be a terrorist attack against the people who were trying to keep Iraq on some level of a republican form of government versus a theocracy, a caliphate, if you will. And these people in Iraq are the ones that we were fighting a mere couple of years ago. And to make matters worse, we're still fighting and the Egyptian people are fighting on that front. It's the same Muslim Brotherhood, just different countries they're based in. I mean, let's not forget that it was only a couple of months ago that Egypt, 33 million out of 85 million, 33 out of 85 million people stood up and said, we will not have the Muslim Brotherhood here. We will not subject ourselves to their rule. We will not put ourselves underneath their jurisdiction. We will not allow them to control our nation and take it over. We will not allow them to subjugate us and decimate us and punish us because we don't follow their extreme principles about religion and society and whatever else. We demand freedom. 33 million out of 85. Now, Let's understand something. When you're talking about 85 million people, just like in the United States, we have 315 million, right? But when you take out those who are, too young, under children, let's just use the target of less than 18, and you take out those that are too elderly to be involved because they don't have the capacity or the wherewithal to get around, and you take out everyone who is disabled or incarcerated and those that are whatever. You're talking about a significantly less number than 85 million. In other words, if there's 85 million people in the country, probably only about 60 million of them, or roughly 70%, are adults capable of activity, right? So if you've got 60 million people that are capable out of 85 million who are capable of making a political statement, and 33 million of them, or greater than half, marched on the Capitol and said, no, that's quite a statement. That would be the equivalent, ladies and gentlemen, of having some, we have 315 million people here, so knock that down by, I don't even care if you just take it 20%. It's 200 and, let's say 225 million people. That would be the equivalent of 110 million marching on Washington. Could you imagine 110 million people going to Washington and saying, we're not leaving until you do? We're tired of the tyranny, the oppression. We're tired of the treason. We're tired of you, the monster, killing us, feeding on us, destroying the fabric, ruining our lives, stealing from us, stealing and robbing from our children and our children's children and our children unborn. What a difference 100 million could make. But this president, who declares himself to be a Christian, and yet all of his activities belie that. In fact, he doesn't appear to be a man of religion at all. Anything. But if he leans in any direction, it certainly looks like Islam. And I don't care what your religious background is, every religion tells us, don't judge people by their words, judge them by their actions. And the actions of this particular man are not those of his professed belief in Christ, in Christianity. Not anywhere that I see. And yet, he is very comfortable, it appears, to place himself in a position where he welcomes with open arms the enemies of our country, who happen to also, in many cases, be Muslim. Not all, many. Now, al-Takriti is tied to Hamas. He is a lobbyist for the Muslim Brotherhood, and his father heads the Iraq Muslim Brotherhood Party. These people met with the president in late January, and they went there to discuss al-Qaeda's growing presence in Iraq. Now, you gotta ask yourself, isn't this a little like the mob showing up at the courthouse to discuss, or the police department, to discuss how they should keep the mob out of the neighborhood? Isn't it? I mean, here you are, and there may be some folks out there who are going to say, wait a second now, Al-Qaeda is not the Muslim Brotherhood. I wouldn't say that they are. But I'm saying it's the equivalent of the mob saying, we're the Genovese family, and we're going to make sure that the Lucchese family doesn't take over the neighborhood. And we're here at the police department to meet with the city and the mayor to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay? Let's see. So I'm going to hire one murderer and robber to protect me from another murderer and robber. They've met with the president before. The photo caption underneath the official White House photo says, President Barack Obama greets Speaker Osama al-Najifi, Iraqi Council of Representatives, after he drops by Vice President Joe Biden's meeting with the Speaker in the Roosevelt Room at the White House. The meeting included Puneet Talwar, the Senior Director for Iraq, Iran, and the Gulf at the National Security Agency. That's interesting, isn't it? Philip Gordon, Special Assistant to the President and the White House Director for the Middle East. Brett McGurk, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Iraq and Iran, who, by the way, I saw in a hearing the other day, and he made an absolute idiot out of himself. And Andrew Kim, the Director for Iraq. And they were focused on how they can help Iraqi leaders combat al-Qaeda. And again, I bring to mind the mental picture of the Lucchese the Genovese family coming in and telling you how they're going to help protect the city from the Lucchese family. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care how else you couch it, you can't change the picture that's going on there. You got the Muslim Brotherhood telling you they're going to protect you from Al-Qaeda. Isn't that like the Genoveses and the Luccheses? The problem is that what we have here is a president who is actively working, and I'm not going to mince the words. This is an act of treason on the part of this president to meet and aid and abet the enemies of the United States of America. There are some people who say to me, you're too harsh. In fact, I talked to a guy the other day who was, he was talking to me about the fact that he'd wanted to try to take the show and see if some other stations would carry it. And he said that you're too harsh in your statements. And that's one of the issues, that these radio stations don't want to touch anything that's quite that controversial. You use the word treason. Well, with all due respect, if that's what it takes, that I be silent and that I soft soap it, and that I do what the New York Times does and tells you that 2.5 million people are going to lose their jobs, and that's a good thing because they're going to be liberated, then quite frankly, that's okay. I'm not going to be silent, and I'm not going to change speaking the truth so that this show could be more successful. I've been given the argument before by some others who have said to me, well, if you moderated the tone of the show, you could enlarge your audience, which means that you'd be able to educate more people, because I get what you're trying to do. But my point is that if I'm moderating the tone of the show to educate new people, but all I'm doing is feeding them pabulum, if all I'm doing is feeding them more disinformation or not giving, I'm lying to them by omission, then I wouldn't be any different than that which I assail on a daily basis, would I? I know it's not popular, because when people see what's happening, it makes it apparent that they have to do something about it. That's why bad news is never popular. That's why Mark Twain said, in the beginning, the patriot is a scarce man, hated and scorned. But when his cause succeeds, the timid join him, because then it costs nothing to be a patriot. So I'm asking you, unlike this president, unlike this Congress, are you willing to do the hard work? Are you willing to take the flack? Are you willing to be less successful by someone else's estimation because you're silent or you've compromised yourself to appease someone else? Quite frankly, there's nothing that you could do. There's not white horses and crowbars and jackhammers that could make me meet with the Muslim Brotherhood leaders. And our president should be willing to stand up and say the same. It's sad that we have a president, for the first time in our history, who is actively a member of the enemy. But that's where we are. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. If you'd like to sponsor this program, if you'd like to advertise with us, send me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. If you'd like to give us some feedback on this particular show or any of the segments prior, please feel free to do so. We'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear your feedback, even if it's not always positive. Make sure that you support and patronize our sponsors, please, because they're the ones who keep this program on the air. Visit the folks over at the Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop at 417-257-1776. Make sure that you swing in there and get your hair cut at Wits End Classic Barbershop, right there on the square in West Plains, where they do the best haircut you can get for $10. The law offices of Jason Henry right on the square as well at 417-256-4100, where you can have any legal issue that you have taken care of and dealt with in a caring manner, but also an effective manner. Make sure that you see our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, where I'm going to probably go for lunch today and grab a salad. And make sure that you see our friends over at the Battery Station at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. You can also call them at 417-257-7799, or you can visit their website at batterystation.com. Make sure that you see our newest friends and sponsors over at Express Mini Marts 1 and 2. Number 2 is located up on 14 and 63 in Old Granny's Cafe. They have this monster ice-cold beer cave that's just, the thing is wicked cold. Swing in there and make sure that you get they've got beer and liquor there. They've also got snacks and chips and hot food and lottery tickets if that's your thing. They have the cheapest fountain drinks in town. They start at 39 cents, and they've got these, all different various sizes, but they've got one that's like, I don't even know, this thing is like a half a gallon or something. It's only like $1. Anyway, they got vapor cigarette, e-cigarettes, and Tsunami vaporizer liquids. Buy 5, get 1 free. There's a special on those. So do yourself a favor and swing into either of their locations. The other one is right across the street from the pool in West Plains, right at People's Park. And make sure that you take advantage of them. And you swing in to see their place and let them know, all of them, when you get there, that you heard about them at America's Voice Now, and you'd like to just thank them for their sponsorship. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.